Title: We heard something massive moving under the lake. Help this channel grow. Like the video, leave a comment, and subscribe for more stories. This helps us a lot. Thank you. The story begins. In a remote lakeside town where secrets sit heavier than the fog, one story has never left the water. Locals whisper about the night something colossal stirred beneath the lake's surface, shaking the ground and every belief they held. Before you hear what truly happened, prepare yourself, because once you know, you can't unknow it. And if you make it to the end, consider subscribing for more chilling true stories ever. The lake had always been quiet in the way old places are quiet, slow, patient, untouched by anything loud or fast. Generations of people had lived around it, fished on it, and built their lives near its still surface. For a long time, the lake gave no trouble and demanded no attention, until the night everything changed. It started with a vibration, faint and almost imagined, like something humming from deep underground. No one noticed it at first, or at least, no one admitted they did. But the vibration continued, subtle enough to be dismissed yet persistent enough to seed unease in anyone paying attention. It was the kind of disturbance that felt more like a warning than a natural occurrence. There were seasonal cabins scattered around the water, older constructions that carried their own myths. Most of them stayed empty except for summer visitors. But during the colder months, a handful of residents remained, people accustomed to isolation, people who could distinguish the normal groans of nature from something that didn't belong. Among them was a couple renting one of the cabins, two people who had come seeking solitude but would instead witness something beyond any rational explanation. They had chosen the lake for its quiet, imagining mornings wrapped in mist and evenings lit by fading sunsets over the water. For a while, that tranquility held. Days passed in silence, except for the occasional distant call of wildlife. The lake remained undisturbed, a dark mirror stretching far beyond sight at night. Until one evening, as the couple walked along the pier, they felt the wooden planks tremble beneath them, not from wind or water but from something heavier, something moving below. They froze. The tremor passed as quickly as it came, leaving the surface smooth and reflective. They dismissed it, though not easily, blaming the shifting temperature or old wood settling. But as they returned to the cabin, the sensation stayed with them like a warning: something enormous had moved under the lake. Over the next several days, strange occurrences multiplied. The lake became unpredictable, its calm periodically broken by ripples that spread outward in unnervingly perfect circles, as if caused by something massive rising then sinking again. The couple watched these disturbances from their cabin window, trying to explain them away, but their excuses felt thin. Locals they spoke to reacted with unease, exchanging looks that suggested they knew more than they were willing to share. One elderly man who lived nearby avoided the lake entirely. When asked why, he offered only a brief answer: the lake was older than its name, older than the people around it, older than the stories passed across generations. He warned them not to go out on the water after dusk. There were things better left undisturbed in depths no one had ever fully explored. He spoke with the heaviness of someone who had once learned that lesson painfully. The couple didn't know what to make of his warning, but the shift in atmosphere around the lake became impossible to ignore. Birds stopped landing near the shore. Fish disappeared from traps left overnight. Even the trees near the waterline seemed to lean away from it. Nature had a way of sensing danger long before humans did, and everything in the environment seemed to be quietly recoiling. One night, just after midnight, the ground shook hard enough to rattle objects inside the cabin. It wasn't an earthquake, the shaking was too localized, too rhythmic. Slowly, deliberately, like something shifting its weight far below the surface. The couple stepped outside, driven by fear and curiosity, and stared toward the lake. A low, resonant groan echoed across the water, an inhuman sound that vibrated through their chests and left them breathless. They stood glued to the spot as the lake convulsed. A heavy swell rose at its center, a bulge of dark water lifting unnaturally high before collapsing outward in a violent splash. The sound of it rolled across the land, followed by silence so deep it felt alive. In that moment, they sensed they were not alone. Something was beneath the surface, something that had been dormant or waiting. The next morning, they found the shoreline altered. Large grooves carved through the mud trailed from the water's edge into the woods. They resembled drag marks, but nothing known could have made them, too wide, too deep, stretching too far. They followed the marks only a short distance before turning back, overcome by a cold, instinctive dread. Whatever had emerged from the lake had not stayed near it. As the days went on, the atmosphere thickened with tension. Nights grew unbearable. The lake no longer rested, it groaned, churned, and occasionally shuddered as though something vast turned in its depths. Sometimes the couple woke to distant thuds, like heavy blows struck underwater. The fear of not knowing what lurked beneath became a constant weight pressing on their minds. One evening, a dense fog rolled across the lake so quickly it seemed to form out of nowhere. It swallowed the shoreline, seeped into the trees, and wrapped around the cabin. The air felt electrified, tight with some invisible charge. In the thick of the fog, the sound returned, the slow, methodical shifting of something incredibly large beneath the water. The vibration traveled through the ground, up the cabin steps, and into their feet. It was undeniable now, impossible to rationalize. They stayed inside, too frightened to step out again. The fog lingered for hours, carrying muffled groans from the lake as if something was rising closer to the surface. At intervals, the walls of the cabin shook with deep, resonant pulses. Eventually, the vibration ceased, the fog receded, and the night turned still. But the couple did not sleep. Their minds churned with questions they feared answering. The following morning, when they finally gathered the courage to approach the pier again, they noticed something chilling. The water level had dropped significantly overnight, exposing areas of cracked lakebed that hadn't seen air in decades. Large impressions dotted the exposed mud, each one sunk deep and irregularly shaped. Not footprints exactly, but marks of a colossal presence that defied understanding. The couple prepared to leave. They packed quickly, driven by the fear that whatever was beneath the lake was becoming restless. However, as they loaded their car, a deep rumble rolled across the land. The ground vibrated with more force than before. They turned toward the lake just in time to see a massive shape distort the water from beneath, rising with a speed and purpose that made their hearts freeze. The lake erupted. A towering mass of dark water shot upward, accompanied by a sound that seemed to split the air. They couldn't see what caused it, only the immense disturbance and the sense of something impossibly large trying to break through. Terror rooted them in place. The lake thrashed violently, as though a colossal creature battled against the depths holding it down. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, the chaos stopped. The surface flattened, unnervingly smooth. Silence followed, broad, empty, unnatural. The couple stood breathless, knowing without any doubt that the lake no longer hid something passive. It hid something awakening. They fled into the cabin, but even there, the dread followed. They realized too late that what they had sensed was only the beginning. The presence beneath the lake had not finished revealing itself, and the signs of its rising grew stronger by the hour. Each passing moment pressed down on them with the weight of an unseen watcher, as though the thing in the depths had become aware of the ones who had witnessed it stirring. They felt its attention, silent but immense, waiting for the next night to come. The air itself seemed to tremble with the promise of approaching terror. Morning arrived with an eerie stillness that felt staged, as if the lake and the land around it were waiting for something. The couple barely slept, choosing instead to sit in the dim cabin and listen to the quiet that pressed in from every direction. Their thoughts looped endlessly around the same terrifying realization: whatever was beneath the lake had awakened, and its movements were growing more deliberate. The signs of its rising were becoming impossible to ignore, and the unnatural hush of the environment only deepened their dread. Even the air felt wrong, heavy in a way that made breathing feel like a chore rather than a reflex. A sense of impending catastrophe hovered over everything, thick and oppressive. They debated leaving immediately, but the memory of the previous night held them back. The lake had erupted violently, as though something enormous strained to break through the surface. If it was truly rising, they feared encountering it on the narrow, winding road that led away from the lake. The thought of driving past the water at the moment the creature emerged filled them with panic so intense it nearly paralyzed them. Waiting felt dangerous, but leaving felt no safer. Every instinct in their bodies screamed that they were trapped by forces far beyond their understanding. As they argued quietly, the floorboards beneath them quivered, a subtle, rhythmic vibration that sent chills through their bones. They stopped talking instantly. The vibration grew stronger, pulsing with a slow, powerful cadence like the heartbeat of some colossal beast. The couple exchanged a terrified glance, one etched with the dawning certainty that the creature was no longer content to remain hidden. They moved to the window, peering out across the lake's still surface. At first, they saw nothing but the faint reflection of the gray morning sky. But then the water bulged again, a slow, rising swell that spread outward in a ripple too large to be natural. The entire lake seemed to inhale, the surface lifting as though something beneath it was rising with intention. Then, the bulge subsided. The lake flattened once more, but the silence that followed was too sharp, too absolute. Something had changed. They stepped away from the window, trying to force themselves into practical action. They gathered supplies, stuffed essentials into bags, and prepared to leave in spite of their fear. But when they opened the door, they froze. The entire tree line along the opposite shore had shifted. Trees were leaning, not from wind but from something that had pushed through them. A wide swath of crushed foliage marked a path that had not been there the night before. The creature wasn't confined to the lake anymore. It had moved into the forest. The couple retreated back into the cabin, panic rising sharply. The realization hit them with brutal clarity. The creature wasn't simply awakening, it was expanding its presence, exploring the world beyond the water. What they had witnessed was not an isolated disturbance but the early stages of something catastrophic, something that would soon break free entirely. They felt watched, as though an unseen awareness had locked onto them. The atmosphere inside the cabin thickened, suffocating, charged with a dread so palpable it almost had weight. They sat in silence, listening, waiting for any sign of movement outside. Hours passed in a haze of tension. Afternoon light waned, and the forest grew darker. A low, resonant groan suddenly rolled across the land, deeper than any sound they'd heard before. The cabin vibrated as if gripped by invisible hands. They moved to the window once more, compelled by terror. The lake was shifting violently, its surface rippling with forceful currents that churned in circular patterns. The ground beneath them trembled. The vibrations intensified until it felt like the foundation of the cabin was lifting and settling with each pulse. Every instinct screamed that the creature was ready to emerge fully. As dusk fell, the sky turned an unnatural shade of purple-gray, streaked with black clouds that seemed to form too quickly to be natural. A fierce wind tore across the lake, bending trees and sending debris skittering across the ground. But the wind wasn't random, it seemed to swirl around the lake, as though pulled into orbit by something drawing air downward. The couple clung to each other as a deep, thunderous rumble erupted from beneath the water. The lake convulsed, forming a towering column of churning waves that spiraled upward like a vortex. From the center of that vortex came an impossible, bone-shaking sound, a roar unlike anything that belonged to nature. The water exploded outward. Something massive rose beneath it, not fully breaching the surface but distorting the lake with such force that waves crashed violently against the shore. The couple saw a shape, huge, dark, and shifting, moving just beneath the waterline. No distinct form, no recognizable outline, only the unmistakable presence of something ancient and colossal straining to break free. The creature's movement was accompanied by a series of echoing groans that reverberated across the land, vibrating through the cabin walls and rattling everything inside. The lake's surface bulged upward again, higher this time, stretching unnaturally before collapsing with an explosive splash. The vortex slowed, then stopped altogether. The lake settled abruptly, turning calm in a way that felt more sinister than the storm before it. The air grew still. The couple backed away from the window, unable to comprehend whether the creature had retreated or was preparing for something worse. Night fell quickly, swallowing the landscape in a darkness deeper than usual. They lit a single lamp, its dim glow barely piercing the gloom. The silence outside was unnerving, thick with an expectant tension that made every creak of the cabin feel like a warning. Then the footsteps began. Slow, heavy, deliberate. They came from the forest side, not the lake. The couple froze, listening as the footsteps grew louder, closer, each one accompanied by a faint ground tremor. It didn't sound like a person walking. The weight behind each step was too immense, too measured. Leaves rustled, branches snapped, and the sound moved steadily toward the cabin. They held their breath, gripping each other as the unseen presence approached. The footsteps stopped just beyond the tree limb. Silence stretched out, long and unbearable, before a low exhale swept across the clearing, warm and damp enough to fog the cabin window. The couple backed away, trembling. They didn't look outside. They didn't want to know what was breathing on the other side of the glass. The ground vibrated again, harder this time, and the sound of something enormous shifting its weight echoed through the night. After a long moment, the footsteps resumed, moving slowly around the perimeter of the cabin as though the creature was circling, inspecting, deciding. The cabin walls quivered with each step. At one point, the roof creaked loudly, as if something heavy brushed against it. Then, just as suddenly as it had begun, the sound stopped. The night went still. The creature retreated toward the lake, its heavy movements fading into the darkness. A final deep tremor rippled through the ground, followed by a distant splash. The couple stayed awake until dawn, too terrified to move. When morning came, they ran. They didn't pack. They didn't look back. As they drove away, the lake was eerily calm once more, its surface smooth and reflective, hiding everything beneath it. But they knew the creature hadn't returned to sleep. It was watching. It was waiting. And it would rise again. If you made it to the end of this true horror story, remember this: some things beneath the surface aren't meant to be explained, and they never stop watching once they've noticed you. If you want more stories that crawl under your skin and stay with you long after the screen goes dark, make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications. The next nightmare arrives soon, and you won't want to face it alone.